One of the greatest philosophers of all time, Aristotle, discovered the secret of giving persuasive speeches, and it's known as ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos stands for credibility or authority. Logos stands for logic, and pathos stands for emotions. When we combine these three elements, it becomes a very powerful tool to move people just with our words. So let's get into the questions that we need to ask ourselves to incorporate these principles within our speeches, and some examples to inspire us to write better, persuasive public speeches. Hey, my name is Radeep, and I love learning about effective communications and sharing those learnings with you so that you can level up your communications game as well. Starting off with ethos. It's important to establish some sort of credibility before we try to convince somebody of an idea. If I'm a parent and I try to give some advice to another parent about their children's health, that does showcase some amount of credibility, but the same advice given by a doctor would have just so much more authority. So we need to ask ourselves, number one, what are our qualifications as the speaker to speak on that particular subject? Or how have we connected ourselves to the topic to convince the audience of our legitimacy? Some examples of ethos-driven statements in speeches are, based on the dozens of expeditions I've made all over the world, I'm confident that the evidence that we have found is accurate. If you're still unsure, please consider that my advanced degree and fieldwork speak for themselves. And besides just credentials, we can even use subtler examples to showcase credibility, such as, if my age doesn't convince you that I know what I'm talking about, at least consider that I am your grandfather and I only want the best for you. Moving on to logos, which stands for logic. To make sure that we're incorporating logic into our speech, we can ask ourselves very simply, is our idea very clear and specific in our minds, and is that coming across in our speech or presentation? And that becomes evident when we actually take the time to think and write down what our takeaway or purpose of our speech is. What action do we actually want the audience to take after they're done listening to us? And more importantly, we need to ask ourselves whether our idea is supported by credible evidence or strong reasons. Some examples in this space are, the data is perfectly clear. This investment has consistently turned a profit year over year, even in spite of market declines in other areas. More than 100 peer-reviewed studies have been conducted over the past decade, and none of them suggest that this is an effective treatment for hair loss. And even if we don't want to talk about studies or specific facts and figures, we can even use time or history as a strong reason of credible evidence, such as, history has shown time and again that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And finally, we have pathos, which stands for emotions. It's very, very critical that we have an element of pathos and logos within our speech, because people will always lead with emotion, but they will buy into ideas with logic. They will lead in with emotion and buy into logic. So what questions do we ask ourselves to include pathos within our speeches? We can ask ourselves things like, is our speech actually connecting to the values and beliefs of our audience? And are we using vivid examples and imagery and detail to really paint them a picture of whatever is it that we're trying to say? Examples of this are, I'm not just invested in this community. I love every building, every business, every hardworking member of this town. There's no price that can be placed on peace of mind. Or even in a business setting, we can say something like, there's no price that can be placed on peace of mind. Our advanced security systems will protect the well-being of your family so that you can sleep soundly at night. Combining ethos, credibility, pathos, emotion, and logos, logic, into one idea will help move our audience in the direction that we want them to move in, and it dramatically increases our ability to influence. If you have any more questions on things like public speaking or communications, we have an entire website with in-depth articles and resources dedicated just for that. So go check out franticallyspeaking.com. And after understanding these elements of persuasive speaking, you might benefit from understanding how to open your speech in a manner that grips your audience's attention from the very beginning. Check out that video right here.